Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monty Wyatt and Paul Szynski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling. Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast, where we talk about your health, your family, your business. I'm Monty Wyatt.
I'm Paul Szynski.
And we've got a great show with you today. We've talked a couple times about AI, but we're going to go a little bit deeper today. We've got an expert with us that Paul's going to introduce our expert today on AI.
Yes, I'm excited for today's event podcast because artificial intelligence is a big thing right now. And we're calling this Artificial Intelligence Transforming Life and Businesses. And we got the perfect gentleman here to help us try to siphon through this. He's with Capgemini. They do over $24 billion a year, and also 360,000 employees. He is the executive VP of the Central United States, and I'd like to introduce Wade Dewald. Wade, glad to have you here.
Hi, Paul, Monty, thanks for having me here.
Thanks for joining us.
And so this space has just really blossomed probably in the last 6 or 7 months, artificial intelligence. And I've gotten the opportunity to use it myself, which we'll talk about it here in a little bit. But kind of start out, went from 3 to 3.5 to 4 and Chat GPT is the one that's probably the most well-known. But can you kind of tell us a little bit about the artificial intelligence and how you got into this space and how how long you've been working with Capgemini also?
Yeah, it's AI has been around for a while. There's been many predecessors to the GPT that OpenAI has come out with. So there was originally predictive models, there was neural networks, there was statistical models, a whole bit of data science. So people have been trying to use data to make better decisions or predict and have artificial intelligence. I think what's new with what OpenAI has really pushed into the marketplace, as well as all the corners of the world here, is the large language models and the easy accessibility with the GPT capability. So there was a version that came out in December of last year, and now there's a version 4 that just came out a few weeks ago here in June. And again, the expansion of the capabilities and the size of the data sets that can be addressed by the new versions is opening up the avenues to a lot of new uses.
Yeah, I see that. And now, I mean, a year ago, they talked about it, but the mainstream media, nobody really knew what it was. It was just a robot as far as anybody else thought. But this Chat GPT, a few months ago, after learning, actually having a conversation with you at dinner that time, you said you need to get on there and start checking it out. So the first thing I did, I got on there and explored putting letters together, newsletters, and I had a restaurant that I need to do an expansion on. And so I had to put a contract together, which was kind of a unique expansion, so it wasn't just your ordinary general contract. So instead of going to the attorney, what I did was got on Chat GPT, I think it was 3.5, and I wrote an outline of exactly the bulletin points of what I wanted in that contract, and at the bottom I said to put it by Iowa law. It printed out to me right away a contract. I reviewed it, tweaked it, printed out another contract, tweaked it again. The third time around, it came down the contract I wanted. It had the bulletin points, it had everything I wanted in it, and also under the Iowa law, and it was followed to my knowledge. And so had I done this without using Chat GPT, I would send out my information to the lawyer. The lawyer would take a few days to review it, send it back to me, and I would review it. Instead of taking time and spending all that money, I did this in about 15 minutes. It was amazing. obviously, I have to have my attorney review it. Instead of spending $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 on a contract, I'm spending $500. So let's talk a little bit about that, Wade. And I see in administration, law, several different ways that this could be an advantage for businesses out there today. I think it's going to save a lot of money and a lot of labor in the future. Our question is how is that going to affect us in the future? I think in 3 years from now, our world's going to be a whole different business. So, Wade, could you kind of give us a little bit your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think this is in the area of content creation. I think there's a great productivity gain to be had, whether it's on the legal side or on the marketing side, job requirements, just wherever you're creating a lot of content, you can access the power of ChatGPT to create that content and, like you said, go through refinement iterations until you come up with something. But that refinement is done very, very quickly. And the content quality is really quite high. So I think there are certain areas of job functions within various businesses that will be greatly aided by this. There are some people that are saying the productivity lift in industry can be between 30 and 50%, which, again, we've never had since the steam engine, those kinds of productivity enablers in our economy. So it has great promise. Now, there's always the what does the content say and what does the content not say. So I think in your example, it's always wise to use the services of professionals because, law is changing over time, and you still want to be able to keep up with the latest iterations in case law. But in terms of well-established things, it is going to be very, very valuable.
It is, and I found, actually, I put a newsletter together real quick one time. I sent that over to you. You here a couple of weeks ago, and you gave it thumbs up, right? So I think there's so many ways you could put, and we were talking about this earlier. If you have a dispute with someone, or you want to write a letter to your daughter or your son, but you just don't know how to quite articulate it, but you know what you want to say. So you can put the thoughts, what you want to say, but to actually put it together and articulate it, this ChatGPT can give you 2 or 3 different versions until you have it the way you want it. So, which gets back to this, people are going to be writing books with this. They're going to be doing a lot of interesting things. So, where's that line at where we start crossing? I don't know. I think we do need some rules and regulation.
I was chuckling because I had to give a toast at both my son and daughter's wedding here in the last year, and I refrained from using it to actually write the toast because it really needed to reflect on personal events over the last so many years. But in terms of actually documenting other things that are, again, in a data set someplace, on the internet, in other writings, it absolutely can comb through those and create a very high quality response. So your question about where's the line, I think that's one of the guidelines that I think the government is going to have to play a role in. And copyright issues are going to be impacted somewhat by this. Already in the music area, it can create music, it can create art, images. So are those original works, or are they taking from what's already there? And so these are all some of the things that the acceleration of those problems are being brought to the front simply because of the power of the technology.
It is. And and we've talked about this before, taking someone, you can take their voice, you can take their image, and put them on a screen, and it's very hard to tell the difference. And as we all know, that could go to a very bad space. Do you have any ideas how you could maybe regulate this, or have you put that thought together, or?
Well, each company that looks at artificial intelligence and how they're going to start implementing it into their organization. There's a framework for doing this, and then there's a set of ethical AI guidelines that companies like Capgemini have put together over time and are now tweaking for large language models like ChatGPT. So I think a starting point is like, what kind of guardrails should an organization put in place? How will they protect, data and security and those kinds of things? Then also whether they connect processes together or they have human in the middle of each of their process areas. I think that's a really important thing for companies to think through, is just how much automation are they willing to enable, or are they going to segment that?
Which gets back to, okay, it's artificial intelligence. And we've talked about this before, is actually the more you interact, the more intelligent it gets, because it gets more facts. Now, on the other side of it, where are these facts coming from? So it gets back to copyright, where is exactly, does this get articulated from?
Yeah, so it will go after structured and unstructured data. And again, unstructured data can come in so many shapes and sizes, and it can come from the web. And that's a big ocean of unstructured data. So if you narrow it down to an organization's structured data, there's already an element of control around that. And then they augmented it with certain trusted sources of unstructured data. Now all of a sudden you can incrementally build on a data set that you can keep some guidelines around. So I think every organization will have to understand just how far and how fast they want to venture into it. But starting with their own data sets, that's a predefined model, and they can get very good use out of that data. It's typically their production data, their customer data, distribution data. It's data that they already know within their organization. They just may not be accessing it in exactly the same way that ChatGPT would, or any other large language model would allow them to.
Well, that's another example of a great way of pulling information out of your company, especially with a large company like yourself. You could have managers go in, I guess, into screens and bring that information out without the actual physical research, I guess is what on that. So, Monty, you've been in the executive coaching for over 20 years now. I think it's going to change your business. I think it's a business like yours that's going to even be bigger than as ever with this type of. It's going to actually, I think, grow a business like yours. You're going to have more help with lower cost, which will help you scale your business. So I think legal and administrative is what I see as the largest growth in AI. What do you see it at, Wade?
Yeah, that's a question I have. If the data says 30 to 50% of efficiencies, we call our audience the achievers, and what are some things that you see that the average business out there can use artificial intelligence to maximize their organizations?
Yeah, I think I think there are tasks in any business that are done repetitively, and those may be job functions that there's more turnover in the employee base than in some of your other job functions. So where you have this constant turnover battle, and it could be in some of the call center functions, it could be some finance functions, it could be in some of the marketing functions. These are areas where I think it can absolutely augment and or take over some of the function over time. It's not going to happen, necessarily immediately. But organizations that are looking at handling certain kinds of inquiries through a chatbot and with a voice front end to it, like Paul mentioned, those are some things that people are already exploring. Some of the marketing functions on creation of content that goes out on a repetitive basis, those are absolutely areas as well. Through the pandemic here, we had a greater than normal amount of job change and attrition within organizations. And when we really think about what hampers productivity in companies, it's been finding the right people, hiring the right people, training the right people, retaining the right people. And so when you move some of that repetitive work to digital labor, you step past that activity. And you have to make sure that the brand that you want your company to have in terms of interaction and personal isn't replaced by AI bots, but the things that it can do and that companies choose to have it do are appropriate and along with their brand image. So I think that's the balance that different companies are going to find.
What are some of the concerns that you see with AI and that we need to be conscious of? We've talked about copyright, but what are some other concerns that you see?
Yeah, I think there are plenty of concerns, and Sam Altman was in front of Congress here in the last couple weeks talking to how fast the technology is moving. There's at least a set of people around the world that believe there should be some pausing of the technology. There's others that are saying, no, we just have to put the right guardrails and constraints, and Congress will need to act on some of the regulation. And so there's this need to rapidly understand how to keep it safe. So having personal data not be accessible through the model is a big one, because once that, just like any other privacy and security issues that in the dark web, this is going to be something that has to be a concern of companies around ChatGPT and the uses of people's data in that area.
So now, you mentioned Sam Walton is the gentleman's name? Altman. That's right. Sam, he's the one that invented ChatGPT?
Yeah, he's the CEO of OpenAI, yeah.
Okay. And there's not just ChatGPT, but there's other people in this space. Can you talk
Everyone's in this space now, but in terms of specifically large language models, Google has their offering in this area called Bard. AWS is getting into this area. Salesforce in their Einstein area is implementing large language models. Microsoft has really teamed up with OpenAI to implement that into their products. So I think in their Bing search now, it's powered by that capability that OpenAI offers. So there will continue to be more specific, fit for purpose large language models as well, where ChatGPT is a more general capability, and that's why it's out there in the public for consumers to use, and really to use at no cost up to a certain level, and for minimal cost for the latest version of that.
Yeah. I believe 3.5 is free at this point, and then I want to say 4 points, $20 a month or something like that.
For individual,
Yeah, depends on what level. Yeah. Right. Now, Capgemini, are you guys are playing with the technology yourself at this point?
Oh, of course, yeah. And we're looking at what it can do for our business, what it can do for our clients' businesses, and again, that really then comes down to which sectors our clients are in and what are appropriate uses for the automation within each of those sectors. So the answer might be different for a financial services firm versus a healthcare firm versus maybe a digital e-commerce player. But there are very specific kinds of common uses that are coming to the forefront in all these areas.
Yeah, this space is moving fast right now. Yeah. And what little knowledge I've had in the last couple months has been unbelievable, and I think I'm a thumbs up guy on this technology, and I'm going to be trying to learn as much as I can in the next few months to see how I can integrate it with my company. But I do see there's going to be some challenges, but I can see you walking into a hardware store like a Menards, a Home Depot, and you could go up to the board and say, I need X, Y, and what else do I need to add to it? It's going to tell you what you can get, where to get it at, and you walk right into that space and aisle to pick that up, where you don't have to have individuals to deal with. So there's good and bad, but I think overall it's going to be a positive, because it's going to create jobs in the AI space anyway.
Yeah, so think of it just as, the engine is the engine. It can do a lot of things. The way companies will start to make better experiences is exactly scenarios like you mentioned. There's like, what's going to be the human interface that they put on top of that? Today we think of the phone app and we think of the website or portal. Those will be powered or further enabled by this kind of an engine, and it'll be able to bring a lot more concise data to a particular problem space, and those will get refined over time. The voice integration part of it is the other element where today there is voice integration on phone apps, but it's come around rather slowly, I think. But I think voice is picking up very quickly here, and there's a lot of companies in Silicon Valley and other places that are looking at VoiceBox as one example to synthesize voice and replicate voice so that you can both do input and voice output from those capabilities. So that tied to the chatbot, tied to all the back-end data, creates a new technology stack that companies will start to implement.
Yeah, interesting. I'm sure the music in business and everybody else out there are on high alert and trying to figure out how we can integrate this to be positive for everybody. And I'm sure we'll find a way. I really do. I think we're going to find a way, and I think we're going to, in 3 years, have a better world because of it. I really do. I'm looking forward to it.
Our audience is the achiever, and you are leading a group of people. Tell us about some of your what you've gone through in your growth in the last 28 years to be leading this size of organization and to be focused on all and keeping up with all the technology. It's got to take time. It's got to take new information. It's got to take just changing of behavior. And so tell us a little bit about how you've grown and what you've had to break through to keep up with all this.
Yeah, it really comes down to kind of knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know, and that's the reason for getting up every morning and learning something new each day. And being in the technology consulting business, there is never really a dull day or a dull moment. So that, the what's new, what's next, in addition to what's now, those are things that we spend a lot of time on. And you mentioned the word leading. So, there are things that automation and AI will not change. So, leading people and inspiring, and getting people aligned around, certain goals, ethical standards, those are things that I think, are not, automatable. Those are human and personal. So I think that's been a very interesting part of my journey at Capgemini. We're one of the 2 firms that's been recognized by the Ethisphere, ethical standards organization the most consecutive years. So it's really important culturally to our organization, and I think that's going to be more and more important as technology continues to speed up here.
Mm-hmm. So how do you keep up with all the knowledge?
Just a lot of different intake sources, and at Capgemini, there's no shortage of either podcasts. We do, Capgemini does their own podcasts, but also briefings. We have internal learning systems, but you also go external to get some of this as well. We have a great partner, Alliance Network, and we've mentioned some of them here today in terms of Microsoft and AWS and Google and several others. Our interactions with them really talk about what problems are they solving and where are they going with their product roadmaps. So there's those interactions that happen almost weekly. We've got a lot of deep experts in our organization that are specialists in all the various areas. I cover a pretty broad set. But some people go very deep in areas and can peel the onion back many layers. Just talking to them about the art of the possible is another way that you just pick up insights about the do's and don'ts of various approaches. So there's a whole variety of answers to the question there, but again, a broad set of inputs creates more of a well-rounded capability.
Absolutely. I love that it's you got to have multiple sources. You got to have multiple sources, and that's a big part of what we talk about here is making sure you have the insight and the knowledge, and that's a tool that you provide to your clients, but you have to have multiple sources as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. Absolutely.
Cool.
Paul, what other questions do you have? I think this has been a great conversation. It's been interesting to hear the different perspective of what OpenAI can do. And we've had a couple shows on it already, but this is just going a little bit deeper and what the world can see and how it's going to change. And it's going to affect all of us in a positive way. And I think that's what we've got to look for, is what are the positive ways. And I loved how you said it. It's going to make sure that we have better experiences. And that's the best way that organizations and leaders and achievers should look at this, is how do we make the best experience by using the technology.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. And what I think what I like about artificial intelligence, it's not that complicated. I think that, I mean, obviously developing may be a complication, but for the people that want to use it, it's not that complicated. Anybody can get on the computer, and you can Google Chat GPT, and it'll pop up. You'll sign in, start your account, and you can start within 5 minutes of working with artificial intelligence, putting a newsletter out, a letter, or contracts. Like Wade said before, you want to make sure it's an ethical, and check with your lawyer if you're sending a contract out. But I think everyone out there needs to get out there. I don't care if you're 5 years old or 105. You can get on there, and you can get on there and learn that process. But something I loved something that Wade said is about his company was the art of possible, the art of possibilities, the art. And I'm sure that's a collaboration of a lot of people in your company that built a great company like Capgemini. When you got 360,000 employees, talk about going through ceilings. It's climbing. And I know Wade is a very intelligent man, and he's been a big part of growing Capgemini. And I really appreciate you showing up today and working with us, because I know, kind of tell us a little bit what you got out of today here.
I want to ask one more question. What are a couple recommendations that you'd give to our audience? Just if you were to say, this is the one thing that you should be doing right now, what would you suggest that be?
Well, I think it's easy to get an account, like Paul said. So just starting, if you haven't done it already, start to learn what the technology is, just on a personal and consumer level. And then from organization standpoint, small and medium businesses, start to think about where are there challenges in productivity in those size organizations. In larger organizations, I believe it's going to be a competitive necessity that people think about, okay, from a cost structure standpoint as well as an experience standpoint. There's probably no sitting on the sidelines. It's just the speed at which you want to adopt it. But again, if this is not something you're doing already, you should at least explore what the capability holds, and then we look at small, we call them thinkubator kinds of approaches to figure out a problem space. What would be involved with it, what could the AI technology do for it, do some experiments. And these experiments are not as costly to do with this technology as they would have been 5 years ago with a number of previous technologies. So that's what's nice about not only AI, but all of the cloud computing capability is you can get into it at a relatively low cost and then scale from there. So the experimentation is something that people can do pretty easily.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I really appreciate that. And, I think to your point of what did I take away, is that right there. We got to experiment. We got to look at what are the repetitive tasks that we can see that we can create greater efficiencies with, and how do we make better experiences. And the other comment that I really liked of it is know what you know and what you don't know. And I think that's a powerful thing, that you got to find the resources, you got to find the tools to help maximize that.
I might have borrowed that from a Shakespeare play, but going back to my high school. So, but it's always stuck with me. So.
Oh, that's very good. Paul, any other takeaways?
I thought it was great. I'd like to get back to I think anybody and everybody out there needs to get out there and start because in 3 years from now, it's going to be a big part of everyone's life. So it's an opportunity to get out there. It doesn't cost much, and you can get on it in 5-10 minutes.
Absolutely. You know, Wade, the last question we always like to ask our guests is, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to be remembered by? And just share a little bit of your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's as simple as someone that, worked well with our clients personally and as part of the organization. And in our business, you're only as good as your last project. So every time we sign up to do something for a client, it's, do what you say you're going to do. So it's as simple as that.
I love it. I love it. Do what you say you're going to do. Thank you for joining us, Wade. Really appreciate the conversation. Thank you to our achiever for listening today, and keep growing yourself and keep focused on what's your ceiling and breaking through that next level. So keep growing. Thanks for joining us.
Hit that like button, subscribe.